I definitely see it as a space where I can come and relax. You know, people might not think like at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, sun's out, you know, just weeding. It's probably not what people would want to spend their time in, but for me, it's definitely just a place where I'm able to just be, and it's definitely a place where I'm just able to think, you know, be at peace, you know, just reflect on the things that, you know, just are on my mind. Right now, I have a pretty big garden off to the side of the house, but it definitely started with just growing cucumbers, really experimenting with vegetables that I know I could handle, and kind of just maybe just intuitively, you know, say like, all right, this might need a truss, might need some sticks. And so when the pandemic hit, you know, it was an unfortunate time, but it also gave me the actual opportunity, money-wise, as well as time-wise, to really think, okay, you know, how big do I want to start gardening? So I definitely started my garden with the mindset that I'm going to grow food that my family eats, you know, what we use on a regular basis. And then it kind of came to the point where in the next year, I was thinking, you know, with more of a mindset, I want to connect, you know, I guess we're like my ancestors or like my heritage in, you know, the indigenous groups in Peru. So I definitely started looking into kind of plants that I would be able to grow here, you know, without disturbing the environment. So my parents like, hey, I bought huacatay seeds. You know, I'm gonna see if it's gonna grow here. My dad was a bit apprehensive about it. He's like, you know, I don't think this is the right climate. Like, I've never really seen it grown here. And I was like, well, let's see. And so as it was growing, my dad was like, wow, it actually really is. And then when I would pick it, it would have this really gorgeous fragrance to it. It was just very own distinct smell. And so when I showed my house, like, here are some leaves that I got. He's like, got really excited. He's like, oh my God, like, this is great. Like, you're gonna have to get me more. So that year in particular, only a couple of my seeds sprouted. So I didn't really have that many. And I unfortunately forgot that I was going to harvest the seeds. So by the time I went out back into my garden to do a final cleanup, and I went to look at the seed pods, it was already empty. So I was like, oh. But at that moment, I was like, okay, well, they're probably not going to sprout. You know, this probably isn't the right environment for them to grow in. And this year, I go back into my garden, do its first cleanup for the season, and I see small little seedlings of huacatay just kind of growing all about. I was like, oh, so they did survive and they did plant. And my grandma was the one that was really surprised. She's like, oh wow, I haven't seen this plant in a really long time, especially here. And she told me how back when she was younger, she had a neighbor that would grow huacatay specifically, and you know he would share it among, you know, everyone in the neighborhood, in the village. And so it was just really nice memory for her to tell me about. You just kind of learn a little bit more about how life was when she was younger.
Mi abuelo era así, le gustaba plantar cosas, plantas, rocoto, todo plantaba así, chiquito nomás, el jardín tiene la sierra. Ahí plantaba, yo me acuerdo, y ahí siempre ahí familia sale, las plantas plantar, todo planta, rocoto, todo ella planta. Entonces yo me acuerdo de mi abuelo hacía eso, por eso ella salió, mi familia, y ahí plantar todas las cositas, le dije yo.
Yeah, and then it just stands as this skinny little pole at the end. Other than that, but yeah, it's a pretty nice smell. So I would say it's savory. It's definitely, you would kind of smell this like in a meat dish, kind of like a nice thick sauce, a stew-like. And I would say it does have a bit of a small mint undertone, but it's definitely more pungent, but in a good way. Maybe basil, not sweet basil, but the more savory basil, where it kind of does have a strong smell that kind of stays with you. Very savory, tasty, musky maybe. It's definitely on the heavier side when it comes to fragrance. Usually you kind of separate this into bundles when you wash them, kind of bend them over, wrap them around each other, and then you kind of just measure off like how big those ones are, and then just use in dishes. I think for my parents, I see Peru as kind of like their home, their childhood home. You know, that's where they started. And obviously, you know, moving to America, you know, this is, you know, this new home. It's what I call home. And for me, it's also kind of, in a way, going back home or going back to my parents' lives and being able to kind of have that connection. You know, going to Peru, it's a pretty expensive trip. You know, you can't really make it every year there. And so for me, it's another way to be connected with Peru and just kind of have, you know, even if it's a small connection, I'm able to do it through food. I think with food for me, you know, kind of encompasses like a whole bunch of things, you know, what's cultural, my heritage, my grandmother, my family, my parents' childhoods, you know, just my own search of really connecting to my Latino identity. You know, growing up in Shelton, you know, it is predominantly white community. So food was also another way for me to kind of reclaim that identity that I might have put off or just kind of ignored to the side. So I definitely feel it's expanded the community I'm engaging with, as well as affirming and reconnecting with my family, with my grandparents, and just, I guess, made me feel more whole in that identity and connect with others.